Hey, Josh here from Bogren Digital, and I'm here to show you our new product, Trivium Drums. Trivium are a Grammy-nominated metal band, and Alex Bent is known as one of the most technical and precise players in metal. Trivium Drums is designed to complement Trivium amp knobs perfectly in a mix to make sure that you can get a full band mix in just a few clicks. Let's dive in. So here we are in Trivium Drums with Alex Bent's signature setup for Trivium, and you'll notice straight away that the cymbals are set up symmetrically. Now that's because Alex is one of those incredible players who, it doesn't matter which hand is doing what, he can play the snare with his left hand, groove on the ride with his right, or swap that completely around, groove on the right hand with the snare, and be dancing away on that ride with his left hand. But you'll also notice as you start clicking around and using the drums, the cymbals aren't exactly the same on either side, so there's a different choice for each cymbal on the left or the right, depending on, the rides and chinas and things. So let's take a listen to that. So there you can see that the cymbals are similar on each side, but they just give you a different flavor depending on what you want for a particular part. The center of the whole kit, the Tama Star Classic maple shells, you got 2 kicks and 5 toms. You've got a kick main for your right foot and a second kick for Alex's left foot. And then you've got toms 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in the center of the kit, you've got a Tama bell brass snare, but this is from 1980, an original run, and this snare is coveted, sought after, it sounds amazing, and this is what it sounds like. And just listen to that room. These drums were sampled at Fascination Street Studios in Sweden, which is a purpose-built studio complex made to Jens Bogren's personal specifications. And in the live room where these drums were recorded, you've got 23 feet high ceilings, which is a pretty massive room. But then you've also got things like full wood paneling and no parallel surfaces. So the room reverb, the decay of, the snare, toms, everything is super smooth, massive sounding, and, just perfect for this Trivium kit. So let's hear how all this comes together with the default preset and a groove performed by Alex himself. So as you can hear from that groove, the drums are punchy but tight. Alex is an incredible technical player, and he plays fast runs, fast grooves all the time, and he doesn't want anything getting in his way. So while the drums need to maintain that impact, they also need to be super tight and controlled, and Jens has done an amazing job expertly engineering these to do just that. Something you'll also notice looking at this default view, the kit view, is there's a processed and natural selection here at the bottom. And these are 2 different sample sets, and the natural samples are exactly what Jens captured on the day. But what you'll find when you listen to these is that they don't sound raw. And this is because Jens focuses on getting a great sound at source, tracking through analog signal chains, and essentially getting the sounds 90% of the way there whilst tracking. Engineering the samples as they're captured through analog gear helps to maintain an organic sound, a pleasing sound that is the kind of thing you only get from high quality studio gear. The process sample set is the natural sounds, but how Jens would treat them in a mix. So let's hear how those 2 sound. So as you can hear, there's not a huge difference, but the process sounds have more punch, and that's going to help them sit and cut better in a mix. Another incredibly important thing to how good this sample library sounds are these 2 guys up here. anti-machine gun and auto double kick. So anti-machine gun kind of does what it says on the tin. When you play really fast runs on a single drum, like snare drum for example, often if you haven't got any variation in velocity or anything like that, you'll get a very unpleasant, unmusical, unhuman sounding machine gun effect where the samples are kind of just the same and just go. This helps to eliminate that by adding some variation to the velocity and things like that to make sure that you don't get that effect and it sounds human, like Alex would play it. The auto double kick is specifically for the double kick, the 2 kick drums. So Alex plays with 2 kicks, and if you were to program all on 1 kick, the main kick, what this switch is going to do is auto distribute the kicks between the main kick and the second kick, depending on the speed of the groove. Believe me, just those 2 things will work wonders on your drum programming. So let's move on to the mixer. So if you find that you never need to stray onto the mixer view, amazing. But for those of you who want to tweak a bit further, you have the standard mixer controls here. So you've got pan across the top and width for both the overhead and the room channels. You've got solo mutes for each channel. You've got faders to control the levels of each channel. And for each of the kit shells, you have a tune knob here. And what this tune knob is going to do is affect the pitch of each of the individual kit elements, the shells. So the kicks, snare, and toms. And what this is really useful for is fine-tuning those shells to a track, especially in situations where you might find that the vocals and the snare drum are tripping each other up, or where you might want to tune the toms to the tuning of the song, that sort of thing. You've got all that you need to do all of that right here. And of course, you've got a master channel over here on the right for controlling the overall output level. And some of you may have noticed already, but there's an advanced panel button right here. And if we click that, it's going to expand that section. In here, we've got reverb controls and bleed controls, as well as a reverb master level and parallel compression bypass. As you can see in this section, the advanced panel controls are grouped across multiple channels. The 2 kick channels share these controls, the snare channels with these controls, and the toms, etc. This was done specifically to keep things simple. We didn't want you to spend hours tweaking in this library. We want you to get started straight away, and if you need to make any changes, those changes should be quick and get you straight back to what you're working on. Not only that, but this library is designed to get Alex's signature sound across to you in a straightforward a way as possible. So for each of the group channels, there's a reverb send, and this is the send level to the reverb master control. And then you have the bleed controls down here, the blue knobs, which are different depending on which channel you're looking at. The controls labeled OH stand for overhead, and these control the amount of bleed into the overhead channel. For example, the snare, if we go to this overhead, if we adjust this down, we're going to get less snare in our overhead mics. And if we adjust this up, we're going to get more snare in our overhead mics. And this applies the same for the room controls as well, except that these control how much of that element appears in the room mics. So for example, if we wanted less toms in the room mics, we'd adjust this control down. And over here, as we've already mentioned, there's a reverb master control. So this is the overall level of the reverb. And down here, we have a parallel compression button. And so this is just very simple on and off. And this is that magic sauce. This is the Jens Bogren special recipe. This parallel compression is going to help your drums have a little bit more energy. They're going to be glued together a bit more and just generally help them sit better in a mix. Moving on to the grooves section. Obviously, all of these grooves were performed by Alex Bent from Trivium. And you've got a selection of different genres played at different tempos. So you'll see here that the one I have highlighted says technical metal 190 BPM. And obviously being MIDI, this can be played back at any tempo, but this was the tempo that it was performed at, and this is what it will sound most natural at when played back. So let's have a listen to a couple of these grooves. Drum grooves can be played by double-clicking and paused by clicking either this play button or this play button up in the top. So you may have noticed these playback speed options as well. So that's just going to help you when you're flicking through the grooves. You're going to find a half speed, normal, and 2x speed option. And you can just click on these to change the speed. And what's really cool about this, if you're not particularly adept at drum programming yourself, or you just want to get going quickly with some grooves, you can load your groove into the top here by double clicking, and then come over to this drag MIDI area and just click and drag straight into your DAW. And this way you can use the grooves to build up an entire drum track for your song just by clicking and dragging. So let's grab groove 1. We'll have fill 2, and that'll transition us into tom groove 5. Super easy. If we click up here in the top right on the settings icon, we get taken first of all to the mapping page. And this is where you can change the assignments for each of the kit elements and the articulations. As you can see, you've got different articulations for types of hits on the snare. You've got different levels of open and closed on the hi-hat. And for the cymbals, you've got hits, chokes, and choke hits. And on the topic of chokes versus choke hits, with the choke hits, you've got a predetermined amount of time that the cymbal will ring out for before it's choked, grabbed by the drummer. And that's great for if you just want a quick and easy way of getting a choke hit. And if you want a little bit more flexibility around how long the cymbal will ring out for before it's choked, you can program in a hit and mute it with a choke. If you're using Trivium Drums with an E-kit or another MIDI controller, the learn function is going to save you a lot of time. So instead of having to trawl through the manual for which note a specific trigger is, you can just hit the learn button, hit the drum on your E-kit or your controller, and this will automatically assign that kit piece to that MIDI note. And you've got 2 of those learn buttons for each of the notes that you can assign to a single articulation. One final thing on the mapping page is the mapping presets. If you click on the drop-down, you get a list of mapping presets that's going to allow you to much more easily switch between different libraries without having to reprogram your MIDI. For Trivium Drums, there are a number of improvements for E-kit users, including a roll-in kit preset, aftertouch cymbal chokes, and improvements to the hi-hat implementation, amongst other things. For more details, check the link in the description. On the settings page, as well as mapping, you've got velocities, and you can access that by clicking on this tab. On this page, you can dial in how your E-kit interacts with Trivium Drums using these velocity curves. Another quick thing to note is that down here in the kicks section, there's an auto double kick sensitivity slider. This will adjust the threshold at which the auto double kick feature starts to have an effect and auto distribute those kick patterns. If you set it lower, the pattern will have to be faster for the auto double kick to kick in and start distributing those kicks. And the higher you set it, the more often it will happen, i.e. the slower the kick pattern will need to be before the auto double kick starts to do its thing. So as with Crim Drums, with Trivium Drums, you'll be able to load a multi-output instance so that you can split out all the different channels onto different channels in your DAW and mix those separately. I won't go over the details of how to set that up. We've got a dedicated guide for that. The link's in the description. You're going to want to come to the mixer view, and where this says master, this is the routing of each channel. So as you can see, all of these channels are currently routed to the master channel, which is then routed to stereo 1 and 2 output for contact. And what we're going to want to do is come to the first drop down, click on it, and click route all channels to sequential outputs. And what this does is automatically assign each channel to the next available output. So as you can see, the kick is stereo 2, kick sub, stereo 3, snare top, stereo 4, and so on, all the way across to room. One thing to note here, as you can see, kick is assigned to stereo 2 rather than stereo 1, and that's because reverbs are always dedicated to stereo 1 in contact, and this can't be changed. So automatically the kick will be assigned to 2 and it will follow on from there. Once you've got everything set up, you will have essentially mirrored the mixer section in Trivium Drums in your DAW. So as you can see, I will have kick sub, snare top, snare bottom, all the way through to room on separate faders in my DAW. And as I play this groove, you'll see the same signal triggering the meter for each channel in Trivium Drums, exactly mirrored in my DAW. One of the things that's important to be aware of when making the switch from stereo to multi is that you will lose some of the bus processing that Jens has applied to the full mix. So as you start splitting those channels out into the multiple outputs, you're inherently going to lose that bus processing. So that's Trivium Drums. The ethos is to keep it simple and keep you focused on the music. Jens Bogren has handled everything else so that it stays out of your way when you're making your music. Get it now on bogrendigital.com.